But Bombay is better no, compared to other places, no? Like Delhi and even Kerala.
How is Kerala?
We are live.
So we are recorded.
Can we start?
Yeah, sure.
Everyone, okay. Welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome to 41st week of NeTalks. Welcome everyone. Welcome Nandan Ghiya. So we have a special artist today. So we are discussing with Nandan today. So we used to put in Facebook that this so and so painting artist, so and so sculptor. Then Nandan was telling that it is very difficult to put him in a box. So I was telling Nandan that we normally tell an artist provokes the thoughts of people, but then Nandan provokes right from the heading itself. To put which header you should put him in. So you can't box Nandan into a category. Is the stuff which I got it from there, right? So he's an artist from Jaipur, Rajasthan. So interestingly, he writes that he was born in an art dealer's home. Okay, and then he did NIFT from NIFT New Delhi, and after that he had an early exposure to vintage photography, but then most of his art, as he and the critics write, is mostly deals around the 21st century existential angst. So what he means by that, we will see in the next 1 hour or so. But then lots of whatever is thrown up by the internet era juxtaposes with real life photography in his works. And lots of things which we may consider as a trivia, some things which might be an error message or a bug or a space or a color. Many things which we see or don't see or don't take notice in the computer, internet, and apps becomes characters in Nandan Ghiya's works. I don't want to talk about his CV part about his works, which I think his works will talk from now onwards. Welcome, Nandan. Thank you very much for accepting our request. We are eagerly waiting to see your portfolio of works. Stage is yours.
Satish. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in and inviting me. And I think that was a very good introduction. So yes, it is about the 21st century angst, which has its roots in the 20th century. And like you rightly said, that trivia, internet. I think half our life is lived on the screen these days, and the trivia that you referred to, it becomes a very important motive. I mean, it informs my practice at every level. And I was born in an art dealer's family. My grandfather was a studio photographer, which has very subconsciously impacted my practice. So I think what I'll do is I'll immediately start the slide presentation. And it will be nice to have some visual reference as I shared my journey with you all. So thank you once again. Is it visible?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And I hope the mic is not visible now, Satish.
Come again?
The mic is not visible, right? That icon on the top?
No, that is not there. That is not there.
So I've called the presentation Reflections on Image and Identity, because the concept of an image itself is something that is core to my experiments, I would say. And they're like experiments and reflections. And also the idea of identity has been a big concern for me, because I was for instance, when I look at my own life, so I was born in an art dealer's family and in the Baniya community, and I a very Hindu upbringing. I went to convent school, then I went to study at NIFT. I wanted to be an artist. So there has been a lot of conflict, which there's been so much change in the last quarter of 20th century in our country. ideologies have changed, that those generational differences. So there are a lot of conflicts to do with identity that I deal in with my work. And most of my practice, a studio photograph is the raw material that I work with. And when you look at a vintage image, a studio photograph, uh, and you think about the concept of identity, everything, from the poses to props to the people in those pictures, there's a very definitive idea of identity that is portrayed in the image. So there is this, looking at our past through those 21st century eyes, and what might result is what has shaped and informed my whole journey of the last 10 years that I've been working with photographs. So first, the image that I want to share is this. There's this advertisement, that a friend clicked at a bus stand in New York. But I'm sure we've all seen this image on a TV news channel, on an ad in a newspaper. A person's identity obscured or concealed, due to censorship or them not wanting to come forward. And the first time I remember seeing this image on Aaj Tak, I think in the late 90s, on a TV channel, and it just stayed in my mind. It really deeply embedded, and I started actually thinking that this would be the image of the future. Um, and and I've always been interested in the idea of the future, or what will come next, or what will happen. And this image, which was this combination of flesh and pixels, so to speak, which really caught my attention and sort of started my journey. So the first series of works, the first work that I created, it was called Thumbnails, and I created it in between 2010 to 12. And around that time, so when thumbnail is tiny icons on our screen, as we all know. And when I look at a thumbnail in a folder, a thumbnail, and it makes me think that it's an image which is of an image, which is again an image of another image. In the sense, the layers that we are building of images, and how we store them, and how we keep them, uh, and and for someone who's looking at studio portraits, which were these singular images of reverence that were there in our temples, on our walls. So, from there to becoming hundreds and thousands of images in our folders, and becoming thumbnails, how the identity of that image is changing over the years. And so this is just a screenshot of my of a folder with my works, where they become a collection of thumbnails and tiny images, and no more with their titles, but DSC 001571158. So all these aspects of the changing image became very baffling uh, uh, ideas that made me reflect and sort of inform my work thereon. Um, this was an advertisement in a newspaper in 2011. Again, one of the things that, so these are things that were really influencing me, or I was looking at, and they were making me think about the idea. So the whole concept of thumbnails, and that these tiny icons, and they come together to create an image. And this is the work which I call Thumbnails, that I created between 2010 to 2012, where I think the image speaks for itself. What you see here is quite a few old portraits in their wooden frames. And then I have also gone on to make really tiny ones, almost reminiscent of pixels. And this is one of the installation images of the same. So for me, what becomes um, fascinating is the fact that, how we are journeying from the screen to outside, from past to present, and all these ideas sort of culminated into this first work. Then the second series that I worked on was called Photoshop version 1 and 2, which was again a comparison between a photo studio practice and the idea of image making on the computer, which is called Photoshop. And uh, I was, as a design student, I was using the software a lot. And every time I would edit an image there, it would sort of take me back to looking at all vintage photographs and reflecting on what was and what was becoming. So this series I called Photoshop version 1 and version 2. And from studio photography to Photoshop, humanity has come a long way. And in those poses, props, filters, pixels are records of image and identity. And um, what is fascinating, like, when you look at an old image, and you see like what I was talking, whether it's the posture, whether it's the garments, whether it's the backdrop, and how those ideas defined our aesthetics, or how what kind of surrounding you wanted to pose in, and how today we've come a long way from Photoshop. We have Instagram filters and Snapchat, and all our phones come loaded with this bunch of filters, and the fact that we want to portray an image through a whole bunch of filters. I think it says a lot about our collective idea of image and identity. So in this series, I did these few works where I simply culminated uh, uh, pictures on the basis of basic bifurcations that I found in studio photographs. So this work I simply called The Pose, which was a collection of a variety of poses in studio photographs that I found. Then this work I simply called Curtain, and the focus in these images was on the curtain, the way it was draped, and the fact that it had to be there in every old image became something very, very fascinating for me to reflect upon. That what an important role it was playing for probably the first 100 years since of photography. It became a major uh, it almost takes its own identity in that image. And there's another image which I call the chair, which is again the inclusion of that chair and all that it would represent to a person, that they either want to stand with it or sit on it. So, like I said, these are things I was reflecting upon when I was looking at these images, and I was just simply putting them together at that point. And so, for this particular series of shows, I also tried to create my own version of a photo studio, which was a, it was more a viewer engagement performance, you could speak, where we created this uh, photo studio setup, and which was props inspired by, so you see a grandfather's clock, you see a chair, you see a curtain. And what I did was, the whole thing was pixelated, because what I was trying to gauge where, this was a photo studio that didn't exist in our earlier times, but it didn't exactly exist physically also. And then we had people come and pose, and we took pictures, and they could take away a copy of it also as well. Then this is the next series that I worked upon between 2012 to 2016. This series was called Search Results. The concept of search on the internet, so whether it's Google search or searching in the computer, the word search and how we are constantly searching, it sort of becomes existential. This term defines the journey of a person, the path of self-discovery, or anything that that we are looking for, and how it is how the concept of a Google search has captured the spirit of human civilization in that aspect. And so the entire series came to be Search Results. So I like Satish said, the motives of the internet were the trivia of the screen. So you can see a gigantic cursor, it's a wall mountable cursor that I made. And for me, there was something almost, I shouldn't say biblical, something almost religious about the concept of this cursor hand, which would, with one click, it could get me whatever that I was looking for, whatever that I was searching for. So it almost became like God's hand in my head. So I make a gigantic one. I didn't know what to do with it. I've never shown it in any exhibition, but I just very happily hang it in my studio. And then I did some works which were inspired by it. So there's a completely black work with just the hourglass cursor, where when you're waiting for your search result or processing, so you're waiting that, okay, it's going to come, that kind of a thing. And that anticipation that builds up when you're sitting in front of the screen and waiting for something to upload. I should, of course, say that this work was created 8-9 years ago, when we were still having slow internet. So there was a lot of wait time before clicking and the result returning to our pages. So all these things became extremely fascinating. Then one day, for fun's sake, we took one of these cursors that I made. We took it to the rooftop of my studio, and we thought, let's search in the colony. Let's click some houses, some windows in the colony, and if some results will come back. So I just, because the concept of search results and how many ways that I was exploring it, that's why I thought I would just share this image also. And then, so this is simply a Google search page where I've written men in red. And if I type that, these are the results that just come. And, when I'm talking about concerns to do with image and identity, and see, this is where we live in today, where gender, sexuality, history, fashion, people on the street, everything is presenting in one space. There are no more individual images with individual identity of the creator, of the subject, of the person in it, or the place in it. But it has become it is, I wouldn't say it has been cheapened down, but it has, this itself is looked at as one image. No more the individual pieces, but a collective defined by the bot or the adjective, and where they all come to exist together. And I made a work inspired by this, which is my own version of Men in Red. This work is called #Men in Red, where I put a bunch of photographs together, and we actually sat and painted the garments in red. We tinted in each garment in the picture, and we introduced the color red. And when I imagine, and I can't think of a singular image on a wall anymore, because whether it's our folders with the thumbnails, whether it's the search results, whether it's albums in our phone, images have come to exist in these collected modes, where we define them. Even in our app collections, we would have folder names that, family, friends, this holiday, that holiday. It's clubbing of images, which is as opposed to what they once were, existing as singular images. So this is another work. It's just called Chairman, and it's just a collection of people on chair. Of course, you would notice there are women also, but it's simply called Chairman. And this was shown it was part of a photography exhibition. And actually one collector of old photographs came up to me quite offended. He's like, you don't realize, and he could actually point out there were some important figures, and he's like, you're vandalizing it, and I wish you had saved that picture. The rest are not so important, but that picture and that picture. And I was trying to empathize with him, and I guess I was looking for that reaction or that engagement also, that where historically speaking, culturally speaking, each image has its own individual significance. But today this is how they actually exist, just defined by a keyword, a value that we associate with it. That it's just people on chair, and if you probably Google it, it'll just yield results, show you people sitting on chairs. And okay, now another work defined by inspired by the idea of search results is this idea of migration, this idea of going to another city to study better, going to a bigger city to make a career. So this work, this is a long work, and what I've done here is, there are lots of institutional photographs that are collaged together to form a massive institutional photograph. And it's hundreds of thousands of people who are in a big city, actually something like a New York or a Bombay. The skyline of those cities is what inspired me to shape the frames. And it's like, and it's an aspirational image that, you see it on the screen, you see it in the magazines, and you hope to grow up and go to one of the big cities and be with those big people and do a big job in a big building and an office by the sea. All those ideas inspired me to create this image. And then also, again, the idea of obscurity that results in those large groups. It's actually, an individual that walks into that elusive idea and actually gets lost in the race or in the it's that romantic notion of, ek akela in a sheher and all that culture is often talked about, which inspired me to create this work. um, this simply came out of imaging, attaching image on Gmail, and and that snap and attachment failed, and you keep trying again, and it's just failing again. And I call it existential angst. So as a word itself, in that search, in that result, in that sharing, and it says attachment failed, right? It refuses to go. But in the Hindu system, the idea of detachment and disillusionment and disconnect. So that dual meaning became something that I really wanted to reflect upon. Then this is another series which is called the blue screen. If I mean, I was hoping that this wouldn't be a very one-sided presentation where I first keep going showing uh, and then in the end we have a, so if any of you feel like if there's something you'd like to share or point out or converse about, please feel free to interrupt. You don't have to just go like this. So this one's called the blue screen, and for this entire period of time, for 5 years, I work with the notion of the blue screen and the different associations that we have with it. This is an installation view from an exhibition. The blue screen seems to be an apt metaphor for the cycle of life, representing both destruction and creation. So the whole beginning of this idea came from the blue screen of death. Windows 98, you're working, you're in the middle of things, and suddenly everything goes blue and blank. In Windows 10, this is what it looks like, the blue screen. So this whole concept of the blue screen again became something. So I think, as like you saw, the attachment failed, like you saw search results, or we are looking at blue screen. So I think that there is, you can say that as part of my professional life, there's a lot of working on the computer, and everything, every aspect, it somehow, that somehow I started finding these dualities in these ideas, and then I started delving deeper into this idea of a blue screen. And then this is another one, you're in the middle of watching a movie on the laptop, and it suddenly, and again that it's reminiscent of the blue screen. And for some reason I can't help but reflecting on the perishability of my own life, or how ephemeral life is, and how we are also like almost, we are running on a battery.
Mhm.
And the fact that somebody decided to call it the blue screen of death, that's the technical term for it, and they had to use the word death in it. So it just made me think and reflect a lot. And I started collecting screenshots of mobile phones. Wherever I would see blue, this color blue, I started just collecting it for reference. Then, those of us who grew up playing Mario with its blue sky, or the CGI that the blue screen is used, special effects, they use this blue screen for. So this blue screen, and what is interesting, so from the blue screen of death, where everything is just wiped out, to this concept of a blue screen that you can create effects upon, you can give life to anything, you can create life in terms of those special effects and simulations. So there's this vast spectrum of associations with the blue screen became very fascinating for me. And this is
So they also use green, no?
they
They
also
also
use green
use.
screen. Yes, they also
Uh,
use, so it's one of the two, green
okay.
or blue. This is a picture from Jaipur. This is a I think 150 years old structure where they decided to paint it with the blue, advertising for the dairy. And so, from the screen to the physical world, this sort of encroachment, that is happening, which suddenly uh, wipes things out. So this is an exhibition view from one of the works that were part of the series. This is from another exhibition. So I started, using that flat blue as something that wipes out that information, that removes that information completely. But then in the act of removal, of the information, it also creates scope for something new to come in, So whether it's history that's wiped out, whether it's past that's wiped out, whatever it is, but it also creates a scope for new values to come in. So
Nandan,
yeah, sir.
these photographs, these references are of real people.
I don't follow the question.
The photographs which you show are real people.
Yes. So I have been collecting vintage photographs for a long time, and they are photographs. I mean, they are photographs of people from Bombay, from South, from Rajasthan, from Gujarat. Uh, yeah. So they are
Living people or
no living people. They're all vintage photographs, which
okay.
nobody, I think so it's a thank you for pointing that out, because I found these photographs in pawn shops, with antique dealers, with kabaris. So just that whole I thought of wiping out. So it's like nobody is interested in these images anymore. A part of their information or association has been wiped out. So they have left their homes, their walls, their shrines, and they've landed into public spaces, almost like that search engine, where you go and you browse through hundreds of these, and you pick up whatever you like, and you build new associations with them. So that's where the photograph is becoming very important for me to work upon or to play with in my installations and works.
Yeah, because if you see nowadays, one of the biggest pastime of common man is to beautify their photos, right? Using many
Yes,
apps.
all the time, all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
And
Just
you are doing a great service to those who are there in the yesteryears, the same service in an artistic way, right?
although I wonder if they would approve of this beautification. I mean, but yeah, it is somewhere these concepts, that how we spend with creating that image, the right image. So we keep fixing it.
And also the frame you collect, the frames, the frames,
Yeah,
no?
yeah.
Like,
So
yeah. Mhm.
yes. I have they're all old wooden frames. So I've also been collecting them a lot, because I mean, there is also for me the idea is that that association that we have,
Mhm.
when I said image. So we have an image of a historical image,
Mhm.
where there is a mount, there is a frame, there's a person in a sepia toned image. You can actually break it down, dissect it,
Yeah.
and okay, these are the composition ingredients of a vintage image. And so yes,
Is that
so
wallpaper or you painted on it?
sorry, come again.
Is that a wallpaper or you painted on
Yes,
it?
I will come to that. So the intervention happens on the photograph, in the mount, on the frame, and even the wall behind it. Because
Yeah.
when you imagine that photograph, in the associations, even the backdrop wall, comes in our collective memory. So the wallpaper that you see is the base on the wall is a vinyl that I've printed, but the one on the work itself is a chint. It's a chintz from Manchester. It's this vintage roller printed textile. So I have a collection of these textiles. We find them a lot in Rajasthan. So that is what. So they use them for a lot of things. And interestingly, somewhere, why chintz also, because when I'm talking about something being wiped out or something new encroaching something that's existing, these chintz were introduced in the Indian market as cheaper alternatives to block printed, the hand printed textiles that used to be there. So I have some fabric samples of these early 20th century chintz that are used here. But on the photograph, it is painted, and then there's fabric pasted on the frame, and there's a vinyl wallpaper that is pasted on the wall because I don't have so much quantity of it.
Okay.
The tiny pixel on the left that you see, the tiny frame with just the floral, that's again painted on it. So there's a bunch of techniques that are, I mean, it's mixed media, so where there is fabric, there is hand painting, there is vinyl also, but within the individual works and photographs, I try to stick to painting everything, making it look like a print, making it look like a reproduction, but it's all hand painted. This is another work. It was somewhat, inspired by the idea of an eclipse. And again, that metamorphosis of something that starts coming in slowly, and takes over. And at the end, it leaves like a blank slate.
So are these paintings and photographs the previous work?
These are all
these
photographs.
all photographs?
Yes. But painted photographs. So some of them we find painted. Some of them are completely black and white. So we do paint them at the studio also. I have an assistant who knows the art of tinting photographs because he comes from a family who used to tint old photographs. So he's trained in that. So the easier bits, I do it. There are some technical bits that I get somebody to do. This is another work which was, so this was just a portion of a painting, and this is painted on the wall.
I'm just curious, you are from Lit, right? So we can see both your photographic background, that is growing up within the photography studio, the influence of that, as well as the textile of NIFT coming in. What did you, and your designer, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know what to say, designer view of things. So what is it that you did at NIFT, and what brought you specifically, like the thing that got you into this kind of work in the first place, like about the pixels and the existential angst of the 21st century. Sorry, I don't know if it's a
I'm
right
so glad.
time or
No, I'm glad you asked it, and I totally get the question. So I studied fashion design, and my father wanted me to take a more lucrative career. He thought art was not a good idea. So he said that, doing fashion, I would get to use my creativity, and and also, get to make money out of it.
Sure.
But 20 years later, I realized that's not the case. You can't be wanting to be an artist and become a fashion designer. It doesn't work like that. But while I was studying fashion, they introduced us to an idea of trend forecasting, where fashion always creates for the future. Like, today you create for tomorrow, right? There's a 6-month gap. So this became very fascinating for me, the idea of predicting the future, understanding the future, making for the future. And I guess even when I saw that image of a pixelated person, the fashion student in me started thinking of it as something futuristic. And so that was one thing. And the other thing is that initially I started collecting these photographs for garment references,
right.
For costume references.
Okay.
So I wanted to create my own range of clothing which was inspired by vintage costumes. And I wanted to style them like that. And so that's the reason I actually started collecting them. But after I had collected hundreds of them, I lost interest in it. It, because you can say the internet came in. The internet was offering much more exciting stuff because the photographs can be very expensive. So the ones you can afford probably are not good enough. And the ones that are there on the internet, they have all that information as well.
Right.
And so somewhere, so I think between 2000 to 2009, I collected lots of them. And lost interest also somewhere down. And it was actually reconnecting that started this whole practice.
Nice. Yeah, I could, kind of connect very well to what you're saying, especially when you showed Men in Red. It's been like, uh, for people of, not, I can't say, I was going to say our generation, well, not my generation, but like, I guess my generation onwards, it's like, the society has become more individualistic. But as we get, or we kind of struggle to be more individualistic, somewhere we are losing our identity and everything looks same, everyone looks same. I mean, that, individual identity is somewhere mixed, it's lost. So that Men in Red really spoke well about, yeah, I love that, because that's been going on my mind as well, especially when you look at models today or film actors today. Everyone looks the same. I mean, I can't
Yes.
recognize. I don't know whether it's because I'm older or what. Like, it's not like in the 70s or 60s where everyone had a distinct identity. Maybe there are just many people, or everyone is expected to be photoshopped a particular way. I have no idea. Or, there's
In fact,
an ideal of beauty that kind of.
I would even go on to push what you're saying is, I think whether it's person in Rajasthan or a person in Kerala, everybody is looking the same.
Yeah, yeah.
Or whether it's person in India or a person in Europe, for that matter.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I took a photograph of kids eating vada pav, and I looked at the photograph and I said, these kids could be from that West Side Story, or they could be from America. Like, they were wearing jeans and t-shirt and eating vada pav and sitting on the street, like on at street level, and with the attitude and the look, it was, and the dress, it was just, so.
So I spend a lot of time in the kitchen. I love cooking, and my favorite YouTube channel is called Best Ever Food Show.
Okay.
And ironically, the best reviews of Indian food are done by an American, who travels to India, and he creates these very Hollywood style food videos of 250 egg omelette in Bombay and biggest thali ever and stuff. So that's where what is becoming, where there is so much of course, it's, one could call it, there's a lot of exchange,
Yes.
but then in that exchange, it's flattening everything.
Yeah, I think before it kind of, I don't know where it will go, but that's
just to add on to that, actually the same thing has happened with the public spaces also. Like, if you should have gone to Jaipur or Mangalore or Delhi or Bangalore, maybe 30-40 years back, each city would have been very different. Now, if you go today, like, you'll see the same Burger King and same Levi's and same mall and same brand shop in any place.
They're even branding idli, I mean, even the local food is being, there are brands that homogenizing it all.
Commodification.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think Sabida was asking the same thing exactly. Would you agree that it is not just the people and cities, even food is being standardized? You just talked about it. Okay. Yeah.
This is so these are just different words. This is not a photograph. This was a vintage print. I don't remember, was it from a magazine or was it one of those calendar prints of the Himalayas that I reworked upon. This is another installation view from a show. And yes,
where was this show happened? Like, it's in 320?
it was called Image Attacked.
Okay.
So I can't remember. There was an artist from Bangladesh,
Okay.
and there was me. So it was a two-person show. And what I've done here is also, as you can see, it's not just on the wall. It's even going on the pillar around it. So when we are talking about this commodification or flattening, it is not restricted to that subject or that image itself. You know, the lines are so blurring, and it's also creating a new aesthetic, a new visual language in that manner. You know, where it just blurs and disappears, and you don't know. So you have a certain inkling, you have an idea, which is not idea based on what you are seeing. It's an idea based on a reference or a recollection that you have of the past, which informs what we see in the present, which doesn't exist in that state anymore, you know.
Yeah.
So that was a portrait of a woman. Another. So these are all like different studies, you know. So with that idea, I'm trying to study it in different ways. I mean, I would prefer to call these works studies. And oh, this is a little video. So you know, this was a show in Bombay where the curator came up with an idea that, you know, we'll have tiny pixels. So rather than having a flat painted, we'll have these tiny pixels, and you know, the visitors to the show, they get to take a pixel away with them. You know, they get to take a part of history or modernity. They you know, get to keep a part of it. So they made a stop motion video with it. Oops. Yeah, there it is. So yeah. So they just made a stop motion video where as each pixel, as each block gets removed, the image unveils itself, you know. And if you put it back there, it just gets obscured again. So which with each addition or removal, you know, a new image is being generated. And then we requested, you know, those who were taking them back with that you know, where this, you know, we literally called them pet pixels, and requested the visitors to share an image from where they're placing it.
Then here is a question from Sabita.
Yeah.
So she's asking, are you distorting the frames with an intent? That the work with that Rajasthani middle-aged woman, she's asking that frames were distorted. Is that with an intent? Intentional?
You know, but this concept of because, you know, we are talking about that loss and transition, and a rectangular frame. When you imagine a rectangular frame, it is a complete image. But I'm not talking about an image which is complete, but which is in a state of transition, which is in a state of distortion. So there, it becomes very important that the frame does not remain rectangular anymore. Because like I said, you know, if I'm thinking that the lines are blurring, and I'm not looking at the image itself, but the mount and the frame and the wall, everything, you know, becomes participatory in it, you know. In fact, there's a work I would like to show here is, yeah. So, you know, this photograph with this old man in a blanket, you know, is and this is actually a vintage wallpaper. I found a few meters of it in a shop. And so when we're talking about the idea of screen, I feel that, you know, everything is so overlapping onto each other, and so it cannot remain a standardized format anymore. So even this stretched bit here, you see, it's again a wooden frame that is changing its shape or going through some sort of a transformation. I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, you did, and it's very interesting.
Okay, thank you. So then, while I was in this series, I got you know, somebody approached the, you know, Nimrana hotels. You know, they were creating a new property, and they asked if I would be interested in doing my blue screen idea into an entire room at the hotel. So we started exploring, and so this property, they have the Tijara Fort Palace, and there was a lot of old furniture that came out, and they sent me pictures of the furniture to start with, that if there was something I could do. So I started creating these. Please don't mind the the disproportionate nature of, I mean, these are not created on a software with accurate measures, but I just started creating these mock studies, almost like these blue prosthetics of these broken, unused pieces of furniture. And we started exploring possibilities of what could be done with this furniture, how could we make it usable again. And these are some things that we tried out. Of course, they didn't like any of them, so we didn't maybe turn them into any final work. But yes, we did create a suite, which they just called Nandan Mahal, where I transformed the space, the tiles, the furniture, the furnishing, and I guess the design education does come to play a role. So there are block printed textiles where I got a block printer to print it half blue and half the traditional motif. So we tried to bring those values in every aspect of it, and some of the works from the studio also went up on the walls. So this brings me to the last series from the presentation, which is called Studio Portraits from the 22nd Century. So in this whole journey, as I progress more and more, and like we were just talking about that, how we are constantly fixing our our faces, our pictures in the phone, and this image, and it makes me wonder that what will people of future look like, because I'm sure we'll get eventually bored of these filters also. We'll get, like, in the sense, it won't be enough to have a fairer skin or defined cheekbones. I think it's nature of humans, right, to want more and more. So that more and more is what I'm trying to explore through these photographs, through these works. And so we are not what we once were, not what will be, but a bit of both, perhaps, in a state of transition. So this is one of the photographs in the making. This is just an image from the studio, and it's when I start distorting or working with it. And this is one finished work from a show installation. And what for me, when I'm working on these works, is that I have to ensure that there's a bit of that the original, the spirit or original identity is left untouched. And then there are bits that I start distorting and playing with. And very honestly, I won't I won't claim to say that if this work is finished, in the sense only time will tell, and etc. In fact, for any of my works, I can't say. In fact, probably I should just call them all incomplete works, because I don't know what they will become, but I'm trying to set them in motion, where they're in their journey from past to the future. Um, so this were two separate photographs that I found of one woman in a red odhna, probably a bride, and this was man with blonde hair. So I'm assuming it was a man from another country. But how I have modified the images to make them look like they are a couple, and they are totally unrelated. But how we just morph these days, and how we just bring those things to bring anything together and make them look like one. And this checkered backdrop, which was even previously there. So while I was looking at the blue screen as a space for creating uh, new realities, this is the negative space that we see in the Photoshop software, this checkered backdrop, which is just there as an empty palette, and that we start building upon. So even that I have taken as a motif in these works. And again, on the works itself, it's painted and there's a vinyl wallpaper in the backdrop. Unfortunately, the printer couldn't match the colors right. So there's a discrepancy in the colors. This is detail of another work from the same series. So the idea of the wallpaper that I was playing with earlier. So I'm even looking at that as I tried making a very organic, a very spontaneous, expressionistic dab of paint, but then I'm flattening it out with a flat print application on it. In fact, something I recently saw. They call it hydraulic printing. I don't know if you've seen. They do it in China, hydro printing or hydraulic printing, where what they are doing is they will print. There's a film of print floating on water, and then they insert this 3D object in the water, and it takes on that print. So unlike screen printing, which can only print on flat surface, they can print on any 3D surface. And it's something like that which sort of inspired this, where it would be a brush stroke, but can a brush stroke be in action but still become flat? And then there is, so whether it's a paint drop or a brush stroke, and that little bit of that blue screen and a little bit of that Photoshop screen, so it's almost like a painted collage. This is another work again with uh, a vinyl printed wallpaper and a textile wallpaper, and almost like the head itself turning into one big pixel. Another image of a married couple. And here, even while I was trying to think of the distortions with just these very decorative geometric elements, I was also trying to think that, while they're dressed alike as part of their wedding attire, can I introduce some elements which would also talk about their different general attitudes or mindsets? So while in the bride, I introduced a very geometric glitch, but with the guy I kept it more with the groom I kept it more organic and painterly. This was an image of an old woman. So I found it they had painted the whole background in this very bizarre landscape, but the old lady was completely black and white. So we painted her sari, and yeah, we introduced these glitch lines. And in fact, this red, yellow, and black. In fact, this work was actually displayed in a workshop in Germany, and they asked me, was the German flag my inspiration? But but it was actually, this was one of my phone's broken screens, which had turned into this linear pattern, which I just captured and saved. This is one work that I started with, and I'm looking at the image of a king. This is photograph of the King of Golia, which I first painted pixels upon, and then I went a bit Kabir on it, thinking, a pauper dies, so does the king, and this is actually painted in the font of Burger King, one of those, or Dunkin' Donuts, I can't recall. But I was actually imagining one of those fast food giant ads. But anyways, this is how I started, and this is what this work eventually became. Um, Another work. Oh, then this was a series of works which I just called Virtual ID, and what you can see is, if you've seen stock images and where the stock image is, you have this line of watermark running with the company's name. So I called this work virtual ID, where, um, 10, 15 years ago, there was a big fashion of creating a fake ID, not a fake ID, but people took names from popular culture or memory as their login ID or user IDs. So I created these cinema and literature inspired names with numbers. There's one called Vito Corleone 2009, Doctor underscore Strangelove 37. This was done in 8, 9 years ago. So it was like that. And I got bored of this work a few years later. It was still with me. So I dismantled it, and the image below that you see, I used to rework and oops, yeah, that's what it became eventually. I'll just be back in a moment. There was a phone alarm going off. So this is detailed from another work. So like I said, these are all my portraits from the 22nd century, in my head. This was again an image of a Marwari lady. And I introduced this camouflage, and I introduced this annoying, I don't know if you've seen this Music's Match. This was an app which we just, anything you're looking at, and this logo just pops up there that, do you want to know the lyrics? So, encroaching your information flow. So again, that becomes a motif. Another one of those King works. So the King is Dead is actually Elvis Presley. When he died, that they created this quote, which was inspired by "Long Live the Queen," and then So I would say, when I say the king is dead or a pauper dies, so does the king. Raja bhi mariye, rank bhi mariye. That's what it had come from. Or when so whether it was attachment failed, existential angst, or when I say the king is dead, so there are a lot of associations there, and this is what it became of this work as well. And yeah, that's about it. That brings us to the end of the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for showing. Fantastic.
I'll stop the screen share. Yes.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Nandan. If I say something, can I?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, there is an idea called hypertextual image. Like when you type something on Google, you'll get the information about it in text, and you will also get a video about it, and you will also get different images from different timeline, and you will also get images of things that are not that are vaguely connected to it, but not the thing itself.
Right.
And the whole thing, it comes in a one single screen, and the whole thing is, you can say that it's an hypertextual image. There's a span of time compressed onto that screen, and and in a way, the mind also works in the same way. Like we don't see an image as an image, text as a text, or sound as sound. They all are getting mixed up. When you try to remember something, it comes in our mind in all these different various forms of mediums. We may remember a song like a movie. We may also remember a text. We may remember an incident, and all this comes attached to one single word or one single image. So it's an interesting. It was actually presented by a professor from Jaipur University. He was talking about this hypertextual image, and you are also working in the same thing, I guess.
You said hypertextual image.
Yeah, hypertextual. It's a word he created. So
okay, I should make a note of it. It's very interesting.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting.
Thank you so much.
Is it about this Joseph Kossuth's work, like 3 chair, 1 chair, the 3 chair in a one dictionary meaning, and then original chair, and then photograph? Is it that sort of a thing, Arun?
So that was more about semiotics, right? Like
Okay. Okay.
sign signified.
Okay.
More into bodhya, hypertextuality and so on.
Okay. Yeah, also, I remember some of your pixels work, which reminds me Chuck Close. Like some of the
Yeah,
works of Chuck Close. Yeah,
yeah.
and he's more into like not showing the identity of that person, and then also because of he paralyzed, so he found
Yeah,
something
he can
very,
only do those. But
yeah, the circle.
it's crazy how he identifies the combination of colors in each circle,
Yeah, yeah, amazing. Yeah,
which
it's
creates
amazing.
that tone, which
Yeah,
you can
that's
make
true.
out from a distance.
Yeah, that's true. That's amazing.
And
Yeah, that's
he started making very photorealistic massive portraits in the 60s.
yeah, that's true. Like, and also his studio shows that, no, like the image he can only work in the very close this thing, no. So his studio has a hole there, like the canvas go down, and then he can paint on top of it. So he don't even see sometimes the whole image, so only that part. Then he's creating that. It's wonder, right? Like, so yeah, so somehow I found, like in your work also, that sort of uh, between abstraction and then figuration, somewhere you're making that suddenly an abstraction comes in. It's kind of a computer this thing, but there is a possibility to see that way also in your work, like it's between abstraction and figuration. Which I felt.
So, now that you point it out, I'm actually that's my next aspiration.
Mhm.
That how they can go more, go more towards abstraction
Yeah.
is something I'm really, currently working on.
Okay. Yeah.
So here is a question from Sabita. She's asking, how long does it take to create a work from the concept to when you feel you will leave it undone? That is point number
So
one.
I read the question.
Yeah,
So
okay.
I'll start with the second question first. That I'm a bit ill-informed with art history. I mean, because I'm more like a self-taught. So it's very difficult to find that art context where I should place my work. Uh, as for how long it takes, so for example, even the last work that you saw, The King is Dead. So I think it was 6 years ago that I had painted that King is Dead on it. And it actually took me 6 years to do it. So what happens is at the studio I work on I simultaneously work on many works. Like, we have soft boards all over the studio where images are put in various states. So there are some pictures which have been there for 10 years. There are some pictures which have been there for 10 days. And I never know how long it will take, but it can take up to 5, 6, 7, 8 years for me to finish one work. Yeah, a lot of these works here that you saw have taken that long for me to do, and not because the physicality, the physical act of execution takes that long, but because it's a juxtaposition of various borrowed motifs, and sometimes which motif is going to really fit in, or which distortion it is in that subconscious space that I'm not able to decide. And I never know when instinctively one day I'm in the studio and it's like, okay, I know how to finish it, and then I finish it. So that's what it is. And then there is no rush to finish your work. And like I said,
Yeah.
I never consider them complete. So a lot of times, they are in a show, and that's how they were in the studio in that state. And there was a deadline to meet, so they were put in the show then. And yeah. And if it sells, it's complete. If it comes back to my studio, I'll do something more to it.
That is That's a possibility.
I don't know if I should be saying such things, but
No, no, but it's
and it's great fun, you keep building, you keep, it's like you just keep building to it, slowly, slowly.
yeah. So where do you collect all these photographs from different part of like
Bombay, Gujarat, lot in Rajasthan, Delhi, all over the place. Yeah.
Just a random question, okay? Have you ever done your own self-portrait?
Oh, what a question. No, why I'm saying what a question is, so, from 2002 to 2000, no, from 2000 to 2005, I only did self-portraits. I
Really?
I only did for 5 years of my life. I used to, so in 2000, I was in college in NIFT, I was studying. So I bought a mirror and any surface that I could get hold of, corrugated boxes, rough shades, discarded paper. I would bring them to my hostel and I would make self-portraits.
Why?
And
Why?
now I have a question. Why did you, like, how did you, like,
Yeah,
come up with
because
the question?
I saw your interest in portraits. Okay. So a lot of your work has portraits in them, and you are missing from there. So I was just wondering, if you had ever considered doing your own self or your own story. I mean, something like that. So what made you do those self portraits in your college time, or when you were studying? What is it that triggered that?
So I think the biggest thing could be the lack of having a subject to paint from. Like, if you are in an art school, it's part of the practice. But you're in a fashion school, but you want to paint. So what do you do? And so in the daytime, there would people happily, they're having a smoke and chai. They would pose. I would make a quick sketch. But then I want to paint at night also. And so that was one thing that led me to start painting, self portraits. And I think, like any young adult, you're troubled with your mind, with your body, with how the way you look like. And I feel that engaging with the mirror, I think it probably helps you deal with it.
It's very interesting. Sorry.
And I have to also say that, in fact, I was having a conversation with a journalist few months ago, and we in the duration of a conversation, I went on to even think that probably these so-called studio portraits from 22nd century, in a twisted way, they are probably self-portraits. That they start with an existing image, but the way I build upon them, and it's somehow psychological self-portraits, they could be. I mean, I don't know what to call it.
That's interesting, because you said as a young person you engage, and that is true. As a young person, you tend to kind of look at yourself a lot more. I went to art school much later in life, so I graduated about 6 years ago. So the thing is, I never did any self-portrait in college. They would keep telling us, "Do your self-portrait." I do portraits of others and do other stuff, but never did. I don't know why. I never did want to, but much later, someone kind of said, you need. And I did photography as well for 5 years. So I had my solo last year, year before last, before the pandemic. And so then the person said, you have to get back to painting. I love painting. So finally, something triggered, and we made a deal saying each of us will do our own self portrait and share. So that forces us to do a self portrait. So finally, I did one. So when you made that thing saying, when you're young and you do it, I'm wondering, is it because of age? Because all my classmates did their self portraits. They were quite okay to do it. What is it? What is it that triggers wanting to do a self portrait? Something to think about.
I used to have a art mentor in the local art school in Jaipur. And the reason I stopped doing self-portraits eventually, because he was like, they're just getting too monotonous. You need to move on in life. And it was that feeling of unacceptance that made me leave and start exploring other subjects. But I was so
But maybe someday you can share your self-portraits. Form.
yeah, would love to.
Love your work, huh? And love the way kind of got and used it, and really fantastic. We have met at Sakshi when you had your show. Now,
Okay,
after seeing your work, I remembered.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, two show, no? With two or two.
Yes, one show we had last year.
Yeah, last year. Yeah, I know. Yeah. So self-portrait, it's a difficult thing one can do, because you're looking at it's almost like a very intimidating, like you're looking at yourself through a mirror, but not physically. Sometimes you are looking at very, so it's
Possibly.
something.
Yeah.
It's something that's very difficult one.
Egon Schiele.
Hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had a book on him in our college library
Hmm.
that inspired me to attempt
So,
a self-portrait.
yeah.
I saw his self-portraits, and the way he drew his hands
Yeah. Yeah.
and this stare, this wide stare. It was so captivating. So
That,
that is, I suddenly recalled. So that was one big inspiration for me to attempt my own self-portrait.
Mhm. Mm.
So, Nandan, you have been mostly dabbling with images and the notifications from the so-called internet era. But technology is progressing fast. Now we are into new trivias, right? Deep fake and video call, where video doesn't work and audio doesn't work. So, have you thought of attempting audio and video and all, bringing into your kind of portfolio?
So that's I've not been able to make any new work for the last 1.5 years, because that's become a big challenge for me. That with this whole new stuff that's coming in, I'm not able to, and it's becoming, I don't know, it's the visual language, is it the technologies? I'm just not able to actually move ahead right now. And somebody pointed out, I was one senior artist I was having a conversation with, and I was like, what do you think about of my work? She's like, yeah, it's like internet antiques. He called it that, all these symbols are now so outdated. They're like your antique photographs. These symbols are also antiques. They're no more relevant. So I'm actually trying to figure out what to do right now, because like you said, that okay, now how do I inform? How do I? So still figuring out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone else? Any further questions? Otherwise, can we? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Nandan. Very different kind of works. Okay, we'd like to a platform. Yeah, there were all different genres of art have to come, right? To stimulate. Okay, thank you, Nandan. Thank you everyone else who are presented today, and thanks to all those who are watching and who have watched this in Facebook too.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you, Nandan. Thank you all. Bye bye.
See you next time.